Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a quick minute to let you know that we've launched our Patreon site and that you can now become a supporter of the show. The awards in there include artist features on our website and shout outs on the show, as well as open invitations to join fellow patrons in our roundtable discussion episodes. So if you think you might be interested, please take a look at the link in the description or just go to patreon.com/@percussion, so /at percussion. Okay, thanks for listening. All right, whoop-de-doo, it's that Percussion Podcast. It's 2:47. We're recording on August 9th, but you're probably listening on July 3rd. So hey there, everybody. I'm Casey Cangelosi, and with me, as usual, we've got some regulars. We've got Karli Viña.
Hey, Casey.
How you doing, Karli?
Yeah, pretty good.
Cool. Ben Charles is here.
Hey, Casey, you said that they'd be listening on July 3rd, which was a month ago.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so what's next month?
September 3rd?
Oh my gosh. I can't believe. Yeah, thanks. Good catch. It's written right there in front of me, July 3rd. So it's only kind of my fault because I wrote July 3rd, but I followed the directions. Hey, what's up with those baby Pop-Tarts? How'd you make Pop-Tarts from scratch or what?
Oh, yes, it's a big involved process. I made apple butter for the filling. I made the dough. I rolled it out. I sealed them up. I made the frosting, but I had just enough dough for one little extra baby one. You can see that if you on my Facebook. It's a little, called it the Robin-sized Pop-Tart.
I appreciate that. I saw that. Is it? How is it the little one? So every time I make something smaller, it ends up twice as burnt as all the others, and but yours it literally looked like a sized down version, like cooked just the same as the larger ones. It's very impressive.
Just that good.
Yeah, nice work. And Ksenija Komljenović is here. Hey, Ksenija.
Hey, Casey. I don't cook, so don't ask me anything.
Okay. Cool. I don't cook a lot. I'm not good at it. I like cooking, but yeah, I should take lessons from Ben.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, hey, before we introduce our buddy Brian, I want to tell you all what happened today in music history, and it's an easy one. It's just a birthday on... Oh, I wonder if I looked up July 3rd. Oh, yeah. Maybe it's July 3rd. I don't know.
That's whatever fact you got, man.
I'll have to check it out. Let's see. Yeah, that could be the case. But in either case, let's talk about Ruth Crawford Seeger's birthday. She was born in 1901. She's the first female percussionist. The first female composer to win a Guggenheim Fellowship, which means she got to travel to Europe and study and compose. And she, let's see. Oh, thank you. Just looked it up. July 3rd. Whatever. It's too much going on. We're going to celebrate her anyway. And anyway, so yeah, she's first female Guggenheim recipient. Goes to Europe, gets to see, meet and study Berg, Bartok, Mio. And I guess a big motivating factor for her as a composer was traveling to Europe and discovering that so many European composers, the perception was that American composers were really second class, and that, okay, there's a lot of neat stuff going on in America, but it's nothing like what's going on in Europe. What's up with that, Ksenija? Why are you all like that?
Because we're snobs.
I guess.
Yeah, we're total snobs. I think that... Well, I'm not going to say it, but there's a little bit of that opinion still today, I feel like, especially in some elitist environments like France and Germany. Yeah.
Sure.
They're totally up. But wait, actually, I have a saving point.
Uh-huh.
I looked up Ruth as well, but I couldn't connect what date you found her related to. So
because
I saw
had it off, by 2 months. Yeah.
But Marion Bauer, who was... there was some, I don't know, there's some evidence or suspicion that the two of them might have been in a relationship. She died on August 9th. So, boom, you're correct. There's something related to Ruth that happened.
There's evidence
the day.
There's evidence they were in a relationship?
There's some suspicion, that the two of them were in a relationship, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Usually I can find some cool scandal or something to report, but as far as I could tell, Ruth was squeaky clean and a good family woman with 4 kids, and but that's pretty awesome. That makes this way more interesting.
Yeah.
It's being investigative journalism there.
So listen, recommended listening is probably her most famous piece, her String Quartet 1931. She is a modernist, okay, whatever that means. I hate that term because it's just like a catch-all term that doesn't really mean anything very specific from what I've learned and what I can tell. But I decided to dig a little deeper, figure out, no, what is the deal with Ruth Crawford Seeger? Like, what makes her distinctive? And her, along with her husband, Charles Seeger, Henry Cowell, and especially Carl Ruggles followed a technique called dissonant counterpoint, which on the surface and to your ear, it may sort of seem like, okay, it's definitely like a descendant of the Schoenberg 12-tone system, but it's really not. It's quite a bit more free in how it works. And if you really want to learn about this, you want to study Carl Ruggles. But dissonant counterpoint basically has a lot of the same rules as traditional counterpoint, like harmonic counterpoint, except that dissonance is the norm and harmony and consonance is like the thing that needs to be resolved. So that's the place of rest. Yeah, Ben.
Casey, I was going to ask, this might be totally like way off, but I know Paul Lansky had some sort of system in his early days that was related to 12-tone technique. And from what I understand, it was basically 12-tone technique, but with a very intentional tonal center. Does this Ruggles technique sound anything like that, or is it just totally different?
With an intentional tonal center, I don't know if it's quite like that or not. Let me actually give you two little examples from Ruth Crawford Seeger, and let's see. Time out real quick. Start share. So yeah, hopefully this will, I don't know, shine a light on that a little bit. This is from a little book called Ruth Crawford Seeger's Worlds, Innovation and Tradition in the 20th Century Music by Ray Allen and Ellie Hisama, something like that. And this chapter is by someone named Joseph Strauss. So he talks about three ways that Ruth Crawford Seeger did dissonant counterpoint. And the one I have here is called by ostinato. So you can see here she has a little 7-pitch cell, right? So this is kind of like traditional serialism type thing, but it's a little simpler, 7 pitches. And just 7 need to be played before they can repeat. So you have this ostinato in the bassoon, right? 7 notes long. And the way the entrances are layered, you notice there's always a matching pitch. So when this bassoon plays F sharp, the clarinet sounds F sharp, right? Concert F sharp. Likewise, the next entrance is also on pitch 2, which is also F sharp, and then pitch 4, which is F natural. So those correspond, so on and so forth. So the way she creates kind of a loose set of rules is to have one of these ostinatos in one of the parts, label the pitches, and then have the entrances staggered and kind of be loosely tied to the ostinato. It's certainly dissonant, but it's also very, very easy to grasp. So that's one way she does it, and it's called by ostinato. Another one is called by rotation. And this will sound very, I think, Steve Reichian, but similar. You've got, let's see, yes, another 7 set of pitches. And sorry if you're not watching on YouTube, I've got some overlays for you to see. So switch over to YouTube if you're interested. And so she's got this set of pitches, G, A, G sharp, B, C, F, C natural. And all she does is she flips the order, right? So the next measure is going to start on the A instead of the G sharp. All right, so it starts on pitch number 2 instead of pitch number 1 and then rotates through, just like clapping music does that same thing. It's this rotational process, which of course Steve Reich called phasing, but Ruth Crawford Seeger and the dissonant counterpointists call rotation. And then moves on to the third note, so on and so forth. So you can see you get this large scale pattern. So inside this 1 7-note cell, you also get the start of every note in the cell per measure, right? And then she goes through a system where she transposes each of them and goes through the process again. So what we just saw is, of course, the prime version of it, and then she'll go to the second version and do the same process, transposed all the same intervals, but on the pitch A. So it's another way to get this whole like the micro is the same as the macro, right? Like the smallest part of the form is the largest part of the form as well. So yeah, that's two ways that Ruth Crawford Seeger, I think, is interesting and unique as far as I know. So yeah, that happened today.
I just wanted to give a quick little footnote to that. One thing that my friend, wonderful composer Zach Browning, has talked about before is that composition is really ways of organizing notes. And I think that young composers often, and it's probably why I've struggled as a young composer, we think of composition almost like improvisation, of like, what are you feeling today, and putting it down on paper. And I find it really interesting when someone can come up with a set of rules like this and it actually ends up sounding like something, if that's making sense. And not related to this, but I just wanted to give one other example of someone that came up with a set of rules. Do you guys know that piece Extremes by Jason Troiting?
Yeah.
It's like 4 people surrounding a bass drum with some little accessories. But anyway, I was fascinated when I saw the score for that it's all based on city names, and the consonants and vowels and the city names have different properties that he uses. And you would never know that if you weren't like looking at a score. But yeah, I think it's so cool when someone can come up with a set of rules like this and make a piece out of it.
Well, it's great because there's all this freedom in her systems, but yet there's also all this cohesiveness.
Yeah.
You know, like it's totally dissonant, but it's also really attainable. Like, listen to that string quartet. It's really, you can just tell instantly, like, yeah, this is a masterpiece.
And it reminds me of like Bartok is another great example. Like, came up with this whole system of stuff with rotational axes and all that, but it also allowed him freedom to express, compose expressively. Sorry, Ksenija, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, Ksenija, you're going to tell us why this is bad American music? Go ahead.
I'm gonna womansplain this. No, I was just gonna say, Ben, who you would like perhaps as a composer. I don't know if you heard about this person, Mark Applebaum. I think he does these things very much. Nobody knows.
Speaking of Mark Applebaum, Karli, you have some Mark Applebaum news?
I have Mark Applebaum news. I think this is the performance I'll have in the calendar, the farthest ahead of anything. But I'm going to perform Aphasia at PASIC 2021.
Whoa, cool. Dude,
yeah.
Way to go. That's awesome.
Well, the whole new music research path of the part of PASIC next year is going to be really cool because it's percussion and voice. So that's the relationship.
Oh, man, that's so cool. I need to. Oh, that's great. Well, way to go, Karli. We'll definitely be watching and cheering along. Hey, well, our guest has been chilling out this whole time, and that intro took a little longer than I meant to. So, sorry, Brian. Thanks for waiting. And Brian Smith is a buddy of mine, and he's been one of the 2 principal percussionists of the Staunton Music Festival, which is where I met him, and it's just fantastic playing with him. I think technically he's my boss, but it definitely doesn't feel like that. It's just fun, and he'll probably deny that. But yeah, he's a fantastic musician and fantastic percussionist. DMA from Stony Brook. He's got all these cool solo and chamber ensemble projects that we definitely want to hear about. Something he calls the Mad Hatter series projects. Project called Screenplay, Data Play, and Human Plus. So, dude, Brian, thanks so much for coming today. And I know you're going to talk about robots and frogs, and that better be cool because, dude, we've had like Evelyn Glennie on this podcast. Like, what are you doing here?
That's going to be hard to compete with the queen, but I'll do my best with robot frogs. Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be here. It's a real treat.
Yeah, man. Hey, how did you, I've kind of wondered, like, how did you come all the way from New York to little Staunton? And I mean, Harrisonburg is kind of the middle of nowhere, Virginia, but Staunton, like, really is literally, like, you would never know. Like, how did you end up at the Staunton Festival?
I lived in Virginia for 7 years while my partner was doing his PhD at UVA. And during that time, I was teaching at 2 universities. I was teaching at the University of Lynchburg. Actually, at the time, it was called Lynchburg College. It's now the University of Lynchburg. So I was there for, goodness gracious, 6 or 7 years. Started the percussion ensemble there and taught lots of lessons and taught, the percussion methods course. And then nearby, there's also Randolph College, where I was teaching theory and ear training. So I did that on top of freelancing for 6 or 7 years while we were there, and then my partner got a job at Colgate University outside of Syracuse. So we moved to upstate New York, and then so that's what got me out of Virginia. And while I was there, I got to know and I played with Yijian Fang, who's the percussion faculty member at the University of Virginia. We played together many times, and so this was, 2013 when we were leaving, and the Staunton Music Festival was just starting to expand. They were, I think, for the first time, were going to do something where they needed a second percussionist. And so because I had this relationship with Yijian, she said, oh, well, contact Brian. It was this piece by Judith Shayton for oboe and 2 percussionists called Time to Burn. It's actually a fantastic piece. It's really great. I don't think it gets programmed enough, but so I went out there and I did that and a George Crumb piece and I think one other. And Karsten Schmidt, who's the artistic director for the Staunton Music Festival, said, this is really great having a second percussionist. You should come back next year and we'll do the Bartok and do a lot more things. And that was the beginning of a long-term relationship where we've done a ton of stuff ever since then.
Ask him, Ben. Do it. I don't even have to read. Ask him.
So, did you play timpani or the percussion part on Bartok?
Oh,
and how'd you guys solve the crash cymbal thing in the third movement? And what'd you guys do about snare throw-offs? And was your other percussionist as good as the lovely Karli Viña?
Yijian's pretty badass.
So I'll start with the last question first, and the answer is yes. just as lovely and fantastic. This first time, gosh, I think now I've played the Bartok 4 times, but this first time I played the percussion part. And of the 4 times I've done it, I've actually done the percussion part 3 times and the timpani part once. Timpani part is way harder. I happen to like the percussion part more, but I did the percussion part first. We used the solution for the crash cymbals in the third movement that's in a pretty popular and I think fantastic video by some Yale percussionists on YouTube, in which they use a modified hi-hat, where they are very closely suspended together. So the crash cymbals, and you have to have some nice crash cymbals. So I had a really beautiful set of old crash cymbals. Darren Lynn, who's a percussionist with the U.S. Marine Band now, played them once. I was the principal percussionist in this orchestra in upstate New York for a while. Anyways, he was taking care over for me during a leave of absence, and got to meet him. He played these crash cymbals and said, gosh, you don't even have to be good to play these crash cymbals. So I put those crash cymbals on the hi-hat and made them really close together so that we could activate the hi-hat by hand. And it sounded really great. And then for the snare throws, I had to mark, gosh, if I reached up in my score up there, I could find all the places where I marked in the score, turn snares off, turn snares off, turn snares off. We had a system, and it was my first time performing it. I don't think I got it right until the dress rehearsal, but I got it right in the dress rehearsal and in the performance. Got all the snare throws right. It has to be performed like a lot of percussion things, like choreography and ballet.
I like the hi-hat method.
Boom.
Well, there you go, Ben. There's your answer. We make sure to thoroughly go about that. I hope you're keeping like a running spreadsheet of all this somewhere, because it'd be really disappointing if this isn't leading up to anything. I'd really like to know how many times we've asked this, and the metrics, the results.
I think I might have said this one time, but I just want to mention to any younger percussionists that I knew the Bartok was a big piece. I'd heard of it, but I had Evelyn Glennie's recording of it, and it starts so quiet and so slow, and every single time as a younger student I would put it on, listen to a minute of it, be like, this sucks, and I would turn it off.
Yeah, it's
and to be clear, it does not suck, and you should definitely listen past that first minute, because very quickly after that it gets very exciting, and it's a staple in our repertoire for a very good reason. And if you ever have a chance to play it with someone as wonderful as Karli or Yijian, please by all means do.
I think for young people especially, that's one that I know I've said before on this show, but when you're in studio class or you're in percussion lit class, don't put the score up on the screen. Get the score in their hands. Just make a classroom set, 15 copies, whatever, and pass it out so they can really watch it up close and play a good recording. And this piece is all the difference.
It is on IMSLP. I don't know if it's legal or not to be up there, but it is there if you wanted to have your class download it. But you mentioned you played Crumb in Staunton as well. Was that I'm blank on the name of the
Microcosmos?
Yeah.
No. It wasn't a 2 pianos, 2 percussion concert. We also did, oh gosh, I've done it 3 times. And I'm conflating the Keiko Abe and the Crumb, which both involve, children and ancient.
Right.
Ancient. What is it? Ancient voices of children.
Of it right now.
It's ancient voices. It's ancient voices of children, right?
Yeah.
Not variation. Or there is no.
Brian.
Sorry. Yeah. No, sorry.
Yeah. We did that together just 2 summers ago. 1 summer ago.
Oh well, that was from Night Music.
That was Night Music, right? Okay.
Yeah, we did Night Music 1. Gosh, what is it again, Karli?
Ancient Voices of Children.
It's Ancient Voices of Children. Thank you. That's embarrassing. You can just edit that out, right?
Sorry, Casey thought the next month was July, so.
So we're good. Yeah. So that was the Crumb that we did, Ben.
Well, speaking of all this percussion, it's really cool, that you have such a good relationship, because that meant that myself and our buddy Eric Genevin from JMU now get pulled down to play at Staunton all the time. And Staunton, it takes place at 2 little churches, and they're just so happy to have like tons of percussion crammed in, and they deal with all the logistics on the concerts, and it's really great. They just absolutely love us. I feel like most festivals would maybe say like, we don't have enough space for this much percussion. Maybe we'll do like a piece, but no, they'll just like pack on percussion in their concerts, and it's just really, really great. So speaking of 2 pianos, 2 percussion, I know you were working on a Rite of Spring arrangement, and also up and coming Ksenija Komljenović is working on a Rite of Spring arrangement. So arrangements cost, and which one should I buy?
Great minds.
A duel. Who can sing the Hamilton countdown to the shooting? No, but I think you said yours is 2 piano, 2 percussion. Mine is marimba and piano, so I suck. I lose less equipment, less people, slimmer music. Tell us about yours.
Well, I mean, this is great. I would have been terrified if it were also 2 pianos, 2 percussion, because then it's like, no, not that. So it's great. There's more difference. So this actually started with the Staunton Music Festival. I did my undergrad at CCM, and I saw the percussion group during my undergrad, the percussion trio there, do an arrangement that they did of the Rite of Spring with the piano duo that was there, and it always stuck in my mind. I thought this was so cool. And a couple years ago, I suggested, why don't we do something like this at Staunton to the artistic director, and he said, yeah, cool, but I'd like to try and do it like Bartok, but so just 2 pianos and 2 percussion. And I thought, oh, that's going to be hard, but good things come from hard challenges.
Yeah.
So where do I start? I'll do the short story. Is that the original version was going to be just to take the original published version from 1913, which was just the piano 4 hands, and just kind of throw in the orchestral percussion and just kind of annotate some things, and then throw in some extra color, and add some marimba and xylophone here and there, just to throw in a lot of the harmonic and lines that are missing. We realized very quickly that it wasn't going to work. That's insufficient. So I should also say at this point that I started this project with a colleague of mine who I think Ben and Ksenija, you both know. So this is Peter White.
Peter! We love Peter. I love Peter. We all love Peter.
He's fantastic. So he was coming to Stony Brook as I was leaving Stony Brook, and it was right when I was going to start working on this project and was talking about it. He's like, that sounds cool. And I was like, I'm never going to get this done by myself. Do you want to work on this together? So we actually started this in 2018. We premiered it last summer, 2 pianos, 2 percussion. So many cool engineering things we had to come up with to solve some really interesting problems. And we're actually still working on it right now because we're trying to get it published. And the whole history of the Rite of Spring arrangements is like a story of many, many additions and many, many errors that are getting corrected. So it's taking us a long time to have a really pristine version.
That's awesome. And okay, so they asked me this last time. What's your favorite movement? Dum, dum, dum.
Oh gosh, it's the movement right before that leads into the sacrificial dance. So what is the name of that movement? I've just editing it for like the 120th time yesterday.
Spring rounds.
What? No, before the second to last movement.
No, it might not be.
No, that's just Casey's favorite.
Oh no, spring rounds is great with all the parallel fifths in there. That's my close second is
I'll
spring
look
round,
it up.
but-
You guys keep talking. I'll look it up.
Thanks, Beto.
There's a really chilling aspect to it. And maybe it's because of the original like Nijinsky choreography, but it's where the victim who's going to dance herself to death gets chosen, and the circle of ancestors is slowly processing around her, and it's just chilling. It has this, I don't know, really arresting quality to it. So right now that's my favorite. But spring rounds, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to pick.
That movement
They're all amazing.
is ritual action of the ancestors.
Ritual action of the ancestors. It's amazing.
Well, I
You
guess
can
I'll
always
ask,
just sing us apart.
I'll ask both Ksenija and Brian, how do you do the bass drum excerpt? How do you do that thing in your arrangement?
For me, that's
A low G or something?
no. For me, it's just on the piano. No. Hello. I just keep it on the piano as the four movement. The four-hand part does.
Uh-huh.
I think it makes most sense because everything else, all the sort of, I can't speak English anymore. Can we skip me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we'll come back to you, Ksenija.
Okay, but you also probably speak more languages than any of us, so that's
None of them well.
No,
Fine.
Brian, there's no excuse for this.
Okay, I'll sing. So,
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Brian, how did you
Somebody fire me.
The two percussionists, you can probably just do it, right? You can probably just.
Well, so this was one of the really like crazy like engineering feats that I have to say I'm super proud of. The other one has to do with crotale trees. Maybe we should talk about crotale trees. I don't know. But for the bass drum excerpt, there's also a big timpani part in there, right? Like, so the main thing is that like while the bass drum's doing all those triplets, the timpani is doing 16th notes, right? And it has this F sharp C like pedal tone that it's going back and forth, and you've got this tritone thing, and so like that takes care of the two percussionists. Well, how the heck do you throw tam tam in there? I don't know. Well, the solution was to go back to Bartok, use a hi-hat. So we used a hi-hat with a large china cymbal on the top cymbal, and then on top of the lower cymbal there's a foam pad, and so when you roll on the cymbal and press down, it mutes very quickly. Okay, sounds great. How do you do that while playing bass drum? Well, trial and error. You use four mallets, and you put wooden mallets of some kind. I use like some Rite of Spring some freer mallets, but I just did them backwards on the inside mallets, and then marimba mallets on the outside. And I mounted the cymbal over the bass drum, so that just on the rolls, the digga-digga-da, that 5-stroke roll, I brought those mallets onto the cymbal, digga-digga-da, and then on the downbeat, press the pedal, and then it mutes. So you can have both the bass drum and the tam-tam playing together.
I feel like, could I have seen you practicing that a summer or two ago? I feel like that sounds very familiar.
Probably.
Yeah, because you all were testing stuff out or rehearsing or something.
Do you have a recording of your last summer's performance?
We do. Some things went fantastically well. Some things, this was the first time we did it. Some things and we had like 3 rehearsals to put it together, and and it was really hard. So some things, were a little raw. I'm putting a trailer together. I'm gonna put on YouTube.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. That's cool.
I think it's a huge challenge. Karli, did you ever take Nancy's marimba arranging class at Boston Conservatory?
No.
It was she was always such an advocate for like changing more stuff. And this summer at the beta seminar, I worked with several students on their arrangements of other pieces, and it just always seems like, okay, right, in the orchestra they have, 10 notes in the chord, and there's so many doublings and so many things, but a lot of times you actually don't even need all four on marimba. Like yeah, scoring is just such a different thing, and I thought Nancy had such a cool perspective on that.
Yeah, Casey, I have a question because I've heard so many stories of Nancy's like marimba arranging class.
Yeah.
I guess Casey and Karli, what was the coolest, hippest like a marimba thing you heard come out of those? Like I knowing Nancy's students, I could see someone doing like Rite of Spring for solo marimba or something.
Right. I mean, of course, her, she was letting us just experiment. Of course, the class was like, hey, take something of your choosing and let's make an, marimba four hands arrangement or marimba duo arrangement or something like that, or solo arrangement, whatever. So nothing that us students ever did sticks out in my head. But of course, there's her published arrangements. She's got a Beethoven, she's got a Chopin out there. And yeah, it's just really cool to see how, like, no, she doesn't just take note for note as much as possible onto the marimba. I mean, she takes like a lot of liberty and a lot of careful treatment that I think students especially would have such a fear of doing. It's like, oh, well, how could I possibly leave out a note Chopin had in there? But that note that Chopin included might be more just about the piano than about Chopin's music, so she really had that sense of freedom. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Karli?
Yeah, well, to me, what was so special about Nancy's approach to the marimba, she knows the marimba and its strengths and weaknesses so well that, like, you're right, like she would say, like, go ahead and change this, or let's make the marimba shine, and make it work.
Yep. Hey,
sorry to like keep on like this is like the Ben praises Karli episode, but Karli did some beautiful like Simon and Garfunkel stuff when I was on the band. I always enjoyed that.
Oh,
thanks,
cool.
Ben.
Pius Chang wrote a bunch of shit while I was there.
I remember actually that was my first exposure to Casey. He posted this video of one of Pius's etudes. He's like, "Hey Pius, can you write something difficult next time?"
Oh, I remember that.
People in the comments were like destroying Casey for disrespecting Pius, and they're like, "No, I think they're friends."
Oh, it's awesome. Well, yeah, that was before that piece was published, and that was how he played it too. So like, there's an introduction on that recording that's missing. This is Pius's E minor etude, if anyone's wondering. There's a little introduction now, but that did not exist back then. It just started like right on the theme. And yeah, it's just like stupid fast and stupid straight. And that's how Pius used to play it too. But he'll tell you now, like, I just can't play it like that anymore. My hands don't do that anymore. I don't think my hands do that anymore either.
Eriko could.
Oh yeah, well, she'd just do it with one hand. Yeah, no doubt. Just shred with one hand. Hey, before we move on to my little topic, I want to take a quick little break and let you all listen to something that I got Brian to send me. So check this out. Let's see if this sounds decent. This is a little project, I think, called RhumbLine, right, Brian?
It's actually called RhumbLine.
RhumbLine. You're right. Okay. See, I just assumed.
Yeah, and I can explain that later.
Well, here let's take a look at it real quick. Dude, so I see little motors revving. I see shish kebab skewers, and I see wine corks. I see cork, right? Okay, so tell me that you can move that thing. Like it looks very movable. You could like put it in a hallway, right?
Yeah, so there are, I think that setup had 20 or so frogs, as we've called them, that are connected to some devices and a computer, and they're set up in a circle, and they are on the bank of an imaginary pond. So this is a sound installation piece, a piece I've done in conjunction with the composer Meg Shadell, who is at Stony Brook, and a percussion colleague of mine, Rob Cosgrove. I don't know if any of you know him. So we worked on this together, and there's a bunch of these little frogs, and the idea is that in the same way that if you are, I don't know, out and about in the world or around a pond, you might hear a bunch of bullfrogs and get a sense of what the contours of a pond is, but you might not see where the frogs are, especially if they're tall grasses or things like this. This was based on Meg, the composer's experience. So she wanted to replicate this. So there's a million of these frogs, well, 20 in this version. And the idea for this version of the piece is that there's a giant black screen blocking the view when you come into the gallery. So yeah, you could put it in a hallway, but it would mess it up, the experience a little bit. So there's a big screen, and you have to just listen for a while and try and figure out if you can tell what the arrangement is, like what is the shape of the frogs. Is it like is it heart shaped? Is it circular? By sensing distance and listening very carefully. Then you go on the other side of the screen and you see what everyone just saw now, which is them arranged in a certain place, and there are gaps. So it's a sound art piece that used these frogs, and that was from what we call the beta release in February.
So cool. That makes more sense now that you say a pond. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Ksenija, sorry.
I think that's really cool, and it sort of relates to an experience I had when I went to a blind museum in Warsaw. I don't know if any of you have gone to any of those, but basically you enter, and then there's a vision impaired person who's your guide, and you leave all your belongings and you enter rooms that are completely dark. And what was really interesting to me was that the moment that we entered, he said, okay, now you will be using your ears to evaluate space. And my friend who was with me, she grabbed my hand and she was like, you'll be good at this. I mean, I almost smacked my head against every single thing in the room. I could not figure anything out. And I felt, oh my God, I was like, oh my God, I use my ears for a living. And I'm really not good at mapping the space. I had no idea how big the room was, where anything was. And they do. They know from how sound bounces back and forward, how their voice sounds in a room, that they can evaluate a room. So I thought that was just so impressive. And I think this is a fantastic musical experience, artistic experience, similar. Yeah.
It actually reminds me in a way of another project that I think Megan Arns reported on way, way long ago called Gamelatron. And it's basically a bunch of gamelan.
I reported on that.
Oh, Casey did. Okay, yeah. And it's a bunch of like little, instruments that have these little, triggers, and it sort of makes like gamelan music, and it's it's cool because you could spread it out and stand in the middle of it. But this almost reminds me of like Mark Applebaum meets Gamelatron. It's like the experimental version of it. So yeah, it's cool stuff.
How good are you at it, Brian? Sorry, Casey.
How good
are you at mapping out the frogs?
The truth is, I wasn't there. I couldn't stay for the experience. So like I flew up to New York. We did this at Stony Brook University back in February, before the world changed and kind of shut down. And I had a couple of these prototypes, and we knew what we wanted to do. And so I was there to build the rest of the frogs and then work to set up the installation. But it was actually opening the day after I had to come back to Texas, which is where I'm based. And I didn't get the experience of trying to map. So that's to be determined. I might run into something as well.
Do update us.
So you built them. And like how does this work? I mean, I have no idea how this works. You said they're hooked up to a computer, and for those of you who weren't able to see on YouTube, we had all these little module instruments, and there's motors triggering them, and there's wires strung and spread around the stage. Like how does this work? So all the wires go from the motors to somehow get into a computer, and like then what happens?
Yeah, there's two main devices. One device is called a data machine. It's something that I've used in some other projects. The Human Plus project that you talked about, a piece that I wrote for me in metallic percussion, where it's me playing with some robots. So that also uses the data machine. Well, that's the company. It's actually called the Automat. So that's one device, and the other is a laptop. And on the laptop is running Max MSP. And so there's a particular Max patch that we ran that has the kind of randomization aspect to it that sends different calls around the pond. We're actually working on modifying it so that there are like a distinct set of calls. Like if one of the frogs is like, bud up, like the others will repeat them. It's a little too random right now. There's not a sense of call and response, but there's a Max patch on a computer connected to the data machines, and all of those little frogs are connected by wires to the data machines. It takes MIDI signals.
Okay.
And so the way it actually works is that the Max patch that we have generates MIDI signals. It sends the MIDI signals to the Automat, and then the Automat converts, that MIDI signal out to all those motors, and then those motors spin.
I like to have it spelled out for our listeners, because I mean, of course, I didn't know either, but it sounds so unattainable when you've never. But now I can imagine. Okay, there's this device, so cool. Hey, well, I'm gonna do a little topic for us all today. I want to make you look at this background when I do it, so you're a little distracted. Can anyone name that band? Anybody? Just one giveaway. This guy right here. That's the giveaway. Well, I'll let you contemplate on it, so you don't have to listen to me.
Casey, can you lean to the side so we can see who's in the middle for a second? Okay.
That's no help.
It's no help. Well, you guys are gonna have to think about it.
Is it New Kids on the Block?
Yeah, way to go, Karli.
That's what I was thinking, but I didn't know.
I was thinking it's not Backstreet Boys.
Oh my God.
Way to go, Karli. That's right. All right. Well, I bumped into something. I'm talking to my buddy, Brian and I's buddy, Eric Genovan, and we were just talking about like the pace at which people release stuff, and the pace, how some composers are really slow and it seems like they take a really long time. Other people seem to release quickly. And of course, we've talked on the show a lot about how the pressures of social media, you're looking all the time. It seems like everyone is cranking out all this stuff all the time. And of course, we know that's not true. It's just your news feed shows everything everyone is doing. But it kind of led me into something by an author and an economist named David Galenson, and he has a book called Old Masters and Young Geniuses. And if you want to YouTube that, you can see a nice little lecture. There's a short one, and then there's a very long one. But or of course there's the book, which coincidentally Brian picked up. But anyway, this author, David, describes what he kind of says is like a much needed reckoning in our understanding between what he calls just experience, like we consider some people to be more experienced than others, and innovation. So, and that there's this kind of widespread assumption that innovation and creativity really belong to young people. And that was something else our colleague Eric was explaining. He was saying, like, it seems like it's always young people winning these prizes. And if you haven't won such and such prize by a certain time, you kind of can just count on it not happening. So yeah, even the word genius, David Galenson goes on to explain, it comes from the Greek word birth. That's part of the word genius, and it's been used to describe artists who make sudden dramatic creations or discoveries at a very young age. Those are who we consider geniuses. So anyway, research shows that quick, radical innovations in art have no doubt had a huge impact on things to come, right? Andy Warhol, Damien Hirst, T.S. Eliot, Hemingway, these have huge influence on what comes later. Yeah, that's what he said, Ksenija. He said Damien Hirst. It's not me, it's him. Sorry.
Awful.
I agree. And I think Damien Hirst totally blows, and I don't think will last myself. But it has to do with how he measures the success, and that's why this is a little tricky. So a lot of how he measures how significant these things are, and this is why his book is so focused on art, is because auction prices are one of the things. And he says specifically, he knows that doesn't mean anything to artists. Like artists could care less how much something went up for auction or how much public appeal there is, so on, etc. So he definitely leaves room for us to like still pay attention to this, I think very cleverly. But so yeah, we consider in general these young innovators who have these like huge, drastically changing things that like drop giant bombs on the scene to like be the creative geniuses. But he says there's also this other life cycle of creativity. Those who arrive at their outcomes slowly and later in life: Cezanne, Dostoevsky, Robert Frost, Francis Bacon, Rembrandt. Does that piss you off, Ksenija? Is that cool? Tim, it's not me, it's him.
Those are cool. Those are cool. Those are okay.
Those are cooler, actually, I think. But however, yeah, so there's already kind of two sides going here. So those are who he calls experimentalists. And this is a little confusing, I think, in musical terms, because I think when we talk about people experimenting, we are talking about these quick, young creation ideas like John Cage 433. You know, it's like, boom, that's like a quick conceptual idea, and we often call that an experiment. But that's not what he calls experimentalists or old masters. So old masters or experimentalists are the people who immerse themselves in an idea and tinker with it for years and years and years, whereas conceptual innovators, I'll just paraphrase him because I'm sure it'll be way better explained that way. He says their goal is to express an idea or an emotion. They plan their work carefully in advance, and they can execute it systematically and decisively. Their innovations appear suddenly, and the new idea produces a result very different, not only from other artists, but also from work of their previous work, which I think we can see in a lot of musicians. Quoting more, the experimentalists, they work by trial and error. Their goal is very different. It's to record their perceptions. They're uncertain how to do this, so they proceed cautiously and incrementally. Their innovations consequently appear gradually and over long periods. They're not declared in a single work, but appear piecemeal in a large body of work. Their uncertainty of their goals means they're usually unsure of their progress, and even the great experimental innovators typically express frustration at their inability to express very elusive goals. So he says Paul Cezanne, famous artist, made scores and scores of paintings of his beloved mountainside, Mont Sainte-Victoire, and spent the last 3 decades of his life making gradual treatments to arrive at the final painting that would be, and subsequently inspired like every generation of artists for the next period in art. Later in his life, Cezanne wrote to a friend, "I've made some progress, but why so late and with such great difficulty? Is art really a priesthood that demands the pure in heart who must belong to it entirely?" So I have a little more, but please, I think you guys have stuff to say. So Karli, I think.
So one question was kind of running through my head as I was listening to all this: is one method better than the other? And which would you rather be? And maybe we were all kind of listening to this and thinking like, oh, I identify with this, or I identify with this side. What do you guys think? Which one's better?
It sounds like to the individual artist, the quick, easy money Andy Warhol is the nicer one. But I think his point is that you need both. And he goes on to explain that after Cezanne, just a year after Cezanne's death, Picasso painted the very famous painting of the ladies. I forget what that's called, and I put my notes away. But the pink Cubist ladies, and that's like the birth of Cubism. So I guess the research suggests that, I mean, you need the old experimentalists, the people who gradually make their work in order to inspire the young conceptualists. So I think as an individual, yeah, you could definitely ask. I mean, it sounds like being the conceptualist is the easier and more fun one to be. Whereas, I mean, Cezanne talked about these struggles. You know, other artists talk about this being like a long haul and a really difficult thing to do. However, I think he's saying for art, you definitely need both. Yeah, Ben.
I was just going to add a quick quote. Like this whole discussion reminds me, there's a famous quote from Pablo Casals, and he practiced 4 and 5 hours a day every day, even very late in his life. And someone asked him once, why do you still practice so much? And he said, because I think I am making progress. And it's like, yeah, it's just the old masters that are still that invested. It's so refreshing to hear that, I think.
That's cool. Brian, what can you add to this? I mean, you actually own the book. You didn't just watch a YouTube video like I did, so you probably actually know what the heck's going on.
I actually, I mean, do I know what's going on? No, that's too much to ask. Like, what is life? I don't know, but I did read. I've gotten like through a lot of the book. It's actually been on my list for a while. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a piece called Late Bloomers, I think from like 2008 or so, based on his experience of reading this book. And so I knew of it, and it's kind of been on my list. And then when you had mentioned, oh, we're going to talk about this, I thought, oh, let's read the book. So I read part of the book, and I guess I had lots of thoughts. I always have lots of thoughts, but one particular thought I had about music was that in his description of experimentalists versus conceptualists, so much of what he says about experimentalists applies to the practice of improvisation. So for anyone who has been in an improvisation group, this experience of what he calls seeking, which is what experimentalists do, is really true to my experience of being in an improvisation group, where oftentimes for the experimentalists, it's really not even the end product that matters. Yeah, you can record an improvisation, but really it's the act of improvising itself and responding to your counterparts. He talks about experimentalists doing this too. They're he uses painting. They're painting, and then they're responding to what they're seeing on the canvas. So I saw a lot of parallels between the act of experimentalism and improvisation.
Hey,
Brian. Good job. You survived through this chat.
Survived Casey's test.
So the main question is Justin Timberlake currently, Casey's sitting on his lap as much as we can see, is he an experimentalist or a conceptualist?
Right. So if you're listening, I have NSYNC as my background because I'm taking this background to a new level. I don't know what they would consider. He does talk about some pop musicians. Like I know he does a chunk on Bob Dylan. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what they would think. I'm guessing they would say more experimentalist because NSYNC is more in the vein of like boy bands. Like they were just another boy band. They didn't really do anything all that different. They just continued refinement on something else. I think one little thing I would add, like I think Rembrandt, although it's easy to find other artists that have done portraits like that, there's something so special about Rembrandt. Like I don't think Rembrandt will like I think Warhol will be forgotten like long before Rembrandt, like Rembrandt's really, really special. Like even years ago, only Ben will remember this. I reported on the next Rembrandt project where a bunch of scientists got together. They did all the measurements and computer calculations to produce another Rembrandt, like another Rembrandt painting. And it's really great. I mean, it's really, really convincing, but it was missing something. Like it was missing this particular like subtle emotion that you can't put your finger on, because Rembrandt had to paint his subjects like these noble people or these rich people. He had to paint them as noble and display their wealth, but also display like the burden they bear for the people they rule over and the hard decisions they have to make. So there's just like always this tint of sadness in every face, and it's really special. And I don't know how many other next Rembrandts that algorithm produced, but the one I saw, the one they showcased, it definitely didn't have that special look. Sorry, I steamrolled somebody, did I, Karli?
You're just assuming. You didn't even read the chat.
No, I did.
Well, when I was thinking about all of this and thinking about the conceptual versus experimental process, all I thought of was this quote from Martha Graham. You all might be familiar with this. It's like a real inspirational one. And I'll share part of it with you, but it's kind of about like keeping she says, keep the channel open. It's not your job to judge your own work, to say like it's good or compared to other people. And what she says, this is the end of, there's a longer quote. And if you search Martha Graham quote quote. You're going to come up with this one, I think. But she says, no artist is pleased. There is no satisfaction, whatever, at any time. There is only a queer, divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching and makes us more alive than the others. And this is where I think, actually, it's, conceptual. You might get more like instant gratification, like, oh, I had this great achievement. But there's something about like the process of, I always want to try to make this a little bit better, and kind of sitting and living with something for a long time. That's what I thought of.
In that huge podcast episode that you sent to us, Casey, which basically said everything in the first 5 minutes, but I listened through the full hour because I'm a good person. Towards the end, thank you, a little bit of morality points. Towards the end, they mentioned something that was interesting, and that's what occurred to me also, is that the conceptualists actually, even though we might think that that's cooler because you get a lot of money when you're 26 because you've innovated your field or something, you actually never get to create, or they say, the public sees you in a way that they compare all your work to your breakthrough work. And somehow you fail to satisfy those expectations, and then you live a horrible life that feels like an artistic decrescendo, while as an experimentalist, you are constantly pushing towards a greater and greater achievement. So people do, as you mentioned, they see your entire body of work as valuable. Mm-hmm. And I thought that it would sort of suck to be an experimentalist, I guess.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, that's why I think, like, I don't think Damien Hirst will outlive Rembrandt, I mean, I think that's not just, I think that's a common belief, it's just like, for the same reason Mozart is a classic, Rembrandt's going to be a classic, like, I don't know how many new classics we're going to have. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, I like the book. I think it's like a lot of really great books. It's really compelling and it's really interesting. It's somewhat provocative that there are these two types. You're either the conceptual type or you're either the experimental type. And I think what's so interesting about this are the problems that happen with the relationships between that. The author does a little bit about talking about the space in between, but what I found really interesting was that even in the extreme examples that David Galenson gives for like the extreme, maybe a experimentalist like Jackson Pollock. So he lists Jackson Pollock as an extreme experimentalist who did no planning whatsoever and just kind of let the paint fall where it may. Even in those extreme cases, there is still a sense of the conceptual. So for example, like when he's going to like drip paint on a canvas, well, if you know that you're going to drip paint on the canvas, you already have some kind of a conception in mind of what the end product is gonna be. And likewise with the opposite, for people who are conceptualists, they also experiment a little bit in the process. And I just find that really interesting, and that like we probably all find ourselves in both of these archetypes, the experimentalist or the conceptualist. I certainly do. And I would, if I had to choose, I'd probably, in terms of artistic struggle, like find myself more in the experimental camp more often. But I think we all probably deal with a little bit of both.
It's always interesting to me when someone comes up with these theories that we can view artists through a certain lens, because like no artist has like put their foot down and said, like, I'm an experimentalist, view me this way. It's like, it's a way of analyzing things. But it really brings to mind two examples. One he mentions is the Beatles, and another one I wanted to bring up is Franz Liszt. And like the Beatles' early works, I mean, it's boy band music. I mean, absolutely. Like, I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's a cute pop tune, but it's far from revolutionary. And people liked them because it was a group of cute boys singing nice little love songs. And then obviously, as they went on, they got a lot more experimental in more ways than one. And they really innovated. And likewise, Franz Liszt was literally hot, young virtuoso pianist of his day. And his early works are these virtuoso piano works that are, they're fantastic works. But it's like, it's like a fast marimba piece by a composer I won't name. It's showy for the sake of being showy. And then when you look at Franz Liszt's later works, all of a sudden they have a lot more depth to them, his orchestral works. And yeah, it's not this like this highly virtuosic young man's music. And actually, I kind of just made a joke, but to be clear, that was Casey's music I was talking about. And I've mentioned to Casey before, like, it's been interesting seeing the way he evolved, because like his old music was like White Knuckle Stroll. It's fantastic. It's fast. It's exciting. And then some of his new stuff is like so much like further out there in a drastic way. So yeah, Casey, I guess what I'm saying is you're past your boy band stage.
Well, thanks, Ben. I've grown so much. It's hard to
And
believe.
to be clear, I think you would probably be somewhere between Justin Timberlake and Lance Bass in looks.
Sorry, I'm distracted. Ksenija put up a band. What's that? Soundgarden?
Nope, but close.
Oh, the dog?
Nope, close. They're older. Damn it, Casey, come on.
I don't know.
I might not know.
Do you
Let's see.
recognize this guy?
That's
Yeah.
Tom
He's
Selleck,
from
right?
your for bloody shirt.
Rage
You're a
Against the Machine.
poser.
Yeah.
He's his audio slave.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
See, that was a quiz. Casey wears shirts of bands he cannot recognize.
Audio Slave is a little after Rage Against the Machine.
It is. It's a bit after you.
Hey, well, speaking of how these two things are joined, the author David Galenson has another example where he talks about Picasso being a conceptualist, but also I'll just read it again, paraphrasing what he said. But less than a year after Cézanne's death, a young Picasso produced a revolutionary masterpiece that would transform the 20th century. After making 400 preparatory paintings and drawings, the largest body of preparatory work for a single picture, the 26-year-old Picasso painted The Young Ladies of Avignon, and that's the Cubist painting that I couldn't remember the title of before. And has been used as like the cover of the Rite of Spring score in the past. The shocking painting that announced the birth of Cubism and the most important painting of the modern era. So that right there, that is a very fitting procedure to his experimentalist description. 400 preparatory paintings. That is exactly like tinkering and tinkering and tinkering. And he describes the same thing with Cézanne, doing it for his landscape. And of course, Cézanne took 3 decades to do it, and Pablo Picasso had his idea solidified. He had it all conceptualized, and then he just had to practice 400 times to get it done. So they're different, but they're similar. One other thing he adds, he says that Cézanne painted to learn. Quote, I seek in painting. I seek in painting. Picasso painted to express himself. I don't seek, I find. So I thought that was cool. Yeah, Brian.
So sorry to be, Debbie Downer. I have a Debbie Downer thought about this. As much as I find it, I find the theory really, really compelling and interesting. But as Ben was saying earlier, it's any sort of analytical framework has its limits, right? And so there's all sorts of limits with this. But one particular thing that showed up in the video and also in the book is that what David Galenson doesn't include in his analysis of what makes great work and important work, and then therefore using that to categorize whether someone is experimental or conceptual, excludes the whole social practice, the social practices of exclusion that are part of forming an artistic canon. So he's analyzing an artistic canon, and he's analyzing what is largely European white men, and there aren't many women. There are no people of color. So I think I'm not to criticize the framework. I think the framework is really interesting, but I think that's maybe where one place where the idea falls a little bit short is that he's just looking at auction records and museum exhibitions and textbooks, and without factoring in the fact that some people were told, you can't be a part of this because you're a woman, or you can't be a part of this because you're black. And I think we just need to recognize that that's important.
Yeah, it's certainly incomplete, and I was thinking to myself how would some of these ideas parallel music? And of course, you don't have that auction metric. You do have the history book metric, because he also talked about how influential something was, but how many times does it appear in a survey of art history textbooks or something. So you can certainly do that in music, but I think you would have a whole lot of other metrics that would appear in music, like how many times such and such symphony gets played, ticket sales in certain repertoire. There's so many other metrics you could do. So yeah, it's cool to think Yeah, from an economist standpoint, these thoughts that I haven't heard musicians come up with very much. Well, I think let's move away from this for now. And Brian, can you tell us a little about the Facebook Contemporary Percussionist page?
Oh, yeah. So that was a group that I started 2.5 years ago because I had a question about a coggle piece. And I thought, let me ask a question. So anyone who has played the piece knows that there's these six movements by Mauricio Kogel, these 6 duets for percussion. So is the name of the piece. It's 7 R's in a row. And I forget which movement. One of the movement involves pouring rice over Glocken, while a recording of a Swiss calling the names of cows plays in the background. So I think it's movement 2, but I don't actually remember. Maybe someone can look that up. So I actually knew of different recordings that could be played in the background, and I didn't know if there was a sort of true or authentic one. So I thought, let me just ask Facebook, and realized, oh, well, the orchestral percussion group isn't really like the best place to ask this, and realized, there isn't a group that could answer this question. So I thought, well, why don't I start a group that's dedicated to contemporary percussion that might focus on things like coggle pieces or Xenakis or whatever. So I started the group with like 50 people 2.5 years ago, and now it's like at 3,000 people. It looks like Ben has found the groups. It's the Ranz des Vanches. It's the second movement.
Wow, cool. What is it? Of course I've joined various Facebook groups, and I don't know, as the administrator, like, are there ever any issues? I know there have been other issues. I found myself sticking my foot in my mouth so many times in groups and getting into trouble and stuff, and the poor administrator has to step in and be like, okay, Casey, shut up. Okay, so and so, shut up. Like, do you ever have to deal with that?
Yeah, I have sleepless nights sometimes.
No.
Early days, like when there were like 50 people in the group, I seated the group and then was like away in a rehearsal and came back 3 hours later, and someone had posted literally like 100 different posts of maracas they were trying to sell, and a different post for each set of maracas, and I was like, oh no, we can't have this. So exactly. Kind of locked down the group. As it's grown, and as I've talked with other friends, I have some friends who help me, moderate and administer the group together, and we've really tried to form it into a discussion space. Unlike, maybe some other groups, like I have shared videos in the marimba player Facebook group and said, hey, check this out. And that's cool. That's great. But we thought it might be nice to have a place where it's just kind of discussion oriented. So there's some rules in place, and all the posts get vetted first, so that we can hope to avoid someone posting 100 posts by my maracas. So yeah, right. There's some stress, yeah. And the goal is really to have a discussion space that's meant for person to person conversation.
Yep. Well, it's interesting. Anytime you try to curate something, you try to give something to everyone, you it's that saying, no good deed goes unpunished. And I know I've bumped into it with just this podcast. It's like, hey, we make no money, we do nothing. It's totally huge volunteer. Then like someone will have a beef with like, oh, why did you pick this guest? Why not that guest? It's like, dude, we don't. It's not like there's a competition to see who our guests will be. Like we don't put that much thought into it. No offense, Brian, but we want to feature a lot of people on the show. But yeah, I've like totally gotten backlash over like certain things on the podcast.
You try your best.
You try your best, and then I guess the thing is, okay, you hope that the thing you're providing outweighs the, seldom complaint or whatever.
Were people upset that we had Steve Schick on twice? Was that it?
There was some outrage.
Once is enough.
No, I think someone was mad. Like we had we had some, yeah, someone like Steve Schick on, and I got some comment that or message that was like, hey, how about giving someone without a reputation a chance for once? It's like, what, for once? We've had such a variety, and like I've said from the beginning, this is, one of the goals is to take snapshots of people at different stages in their career. So, we've had a lot of young people on who are still students, and maybe they just got some recognition for a little competition or something, and so we have some commonality to discuss with them. So, man, Brian, congratulations. You survived the chat. This was like a bad chat today. And we have these stupid background pictures. This was a tough one. Really, you did like jumping jacks and gymnastics to remind people. Yeah.
It was piece of cake. Although Ben's background though, I mean that's like, I don't know. It's I don't know. That's hard to handle.
It's getting
We're adorable.
Too hot.
Look how young we are. Look, Pius is 19. He's already has no hair. Hey, well, one other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap today, the great 20th century pianist Leon Fleisher passed away on August 2nd. So, yep, he was born 1928, and we just lost him a week ago. So, yep, one of the great pianists, and I was very, very lucky to see him perform. And if you don't know, Leon Fleisher had something called focal dystonia in, I believe, his left hand. So one day when I think he was like 36, is the right hand? Oh, thanks. Yeah. Right hand. His fingers just curled up. And this is something that often gets misdiagnosed for something physical, like carpal tunnel or some physical trouble, but it's totally mental, and it does happen to musicians. It happens to people who overuse their fingers and their hands, and it can happen to other body parts as well. But I was really lucky. I remember it very clearly. He played the Beethoven Emperor Concerto, and he just did the best he could with one hand and about two fingers. And every once in a while, he would open up his hand with the left hand and slam down and hit a chord, and then continue to play, and his right hand would curl up again, and then he would take his hand again and open his fingers up and play. And I guess this sent him, before he decided to start playing again, it sent him into a huge depression. He contemplated suicide, but then he realized, okay, I'm going to start doing some things outside of just playing, do more teaching, do conducting and things like that. And then I'm going to try to have a one-handed career, which he continued to have. And yeah, I mean, it was still just like amazing playing and musicianship, and I'll never forget it. And I feel so lucky that I got to see him play with his hand, and not with both hands. I feel like that's a unique experience. Go, Ben, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think it's a great testament to the human musical spirit, so to speak. That, I mean, he very, very young. I read his obituary. Very extremely young. He was just one of those, prodigy pianists. And he studied with some teacher who I can't remember the name, but the teacher said, "I don't teach children," but he taught Leon Fleisher. There was some agreement that Leon Fleisher would stop performing at such a young age, and I think that that was allowed because he was so good. But yeah, and there were several left-hand piano works, like the Ravel left-hand Concerto is a very famous one, and so Leon Fleisher took that into his repertoire. But I just wanted to share two things. One, when I was a student at Miami and Karli was a student at Miami, Leon Fleisher actually came and conducted the orchestra. And he, for such an established musician, musicians can often have a reputation for being difficult to work with, if you will. And he was, I wasn't in the orchestra, I just watched the concert, but he was such a wonderful, delightful person to be around. And then I was looking this up on Facebook really quickly. I have a friend that went to Peabody where he taught, and he posted a nice little tribute. Sorry, it's taking me a second. This is from percussionist Matthew Overbay. He said, My first year at Peabody, I remember thinking how weird it was that seemingly nobody made eye contact or said hi in the halls. Maybe they had places to be or were stressed about something all the time. That September, I realized that the older gentleman that always acknowledged me by the arcade elevator was the legend Leon Fleisher. All of us Peabody students are honored to have heard you play, speak, and espouse warmth as a virtue for life and music. And our teacher Svet also took a lesson with him, I know, on the Bach-Chaconne, and just spoke so highly of him. So what a wonderful person and human being.
It's really beautiful, you know. And I'll add just a tiny thing onto that, because that was a wonderful way to end it, Ben. But you know, it just makes me think of, he has such a strength of spirit. Of course, I don't know him personally. I didn't know him, but I did get to hear him play a Mozart concerto. It was only 2019. It wasn't that long ago, with the Palm Beach Symphony on a concert that I was playing. And it just, like, the wisdom in the performance, like, it just felt like, oh, like, this is exactly how it should be. And how remarkable for any performer to still be actively performing at the age that he was, and especially with all the struggles of vocal dystonia and everything. So
yeah, I just wanted to say something in terms of actually having just read Galenson's book. It changed the way I thought about some things, and for Leon in particular, I think for musicians, I think what's so interesting about Leon's ideas of conceptual versus experimental is that many musicians are really great at both. And so I think Leon's career shows that, you know, for someone who's a prodigy, who, for, you know, as Galenson sets it up, the conceptualists tend to achieve very early. And so he, you know, in that sense, you know, a conceptualist, but had this tremendous career, and all the way up to the end was refining and being a wonderful and brilliant musician, which is characteristic of an experimentalist. So I think that's something special about music in particular, and not all musicians, but Leon Fleisher in particular, that he was able to be sort of a stellar example of both of those types.
Can anybody imagine 5 pianists together on a podcast, like, saying anything about any percussionist ever? Like
other than you?
I can't.
They probably analyze your pieces, Casey.
I don't know. I doubt it. Pianists? I'm probably not. Hey, well, this was fun, Brian. Thanks so much. It's good to see you, buddy. It sucks that COVID's going on and that I don't get to see you this summer, but I'm sure, you know, this will wrap up by next summer. I sure hope.
2021.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Hey, well, great. And yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Karli. Thanks, Ksenija. And yeah, Brian Smith, everybody. We'll catch you on whatever's next, 240 something, like 8 or 9 or something. So, okay, everybody, take care.